Hi, this is Sandy. This lesson is concentrating on making mud still, but we're going to use neighboring colors on that color wheel. That means that the neighboring colors are right next to each other. There's no opposite color, so I'm not sure if we'll really get mud, but it'll be fun trying.
So let's get started on doing some colors that are a little bit different than what we have been doing and learning about. The first one we're going to do is we've tried to make mud, and we're going to try to make mud again, but we're going to use three colors that are next to each other on the color wheel that we really don't know anything about how they're going to interact. So let's get started with that. Remember, our first attempt is always to make mud so that you know how not to make mud. So I'm getting my bubbles on the paper. And if I were you and I would keep these so I would know, I would write down the colors that we're going to use. We're going to use Cascade Green. And you can pick your other colors. You do not have to pick the same colors as me. I'm using Manganese Blue. And I'm using Cad Medium or Cad Yellow Deep. Those are the colors that I'm going to get my use today. They shouldn't make mud. They shouldn't turn into any brown because we really aren't on the opposite side of the color wheel. If this were orange and we were using orange with this, we would be making a brown. If this were a red that we would be using, we would make brown because it's the opposite, the complement of green. So because we're not working with any complements, we shouldn't get the traditional mud. Okay, so I've got my bubbles are drawn on, and I've got water. I've got all clean water right now, but I do want to make sure that my colors are nice and my water is nice and clean. Because I don't have these out on my palette, or I probably do, but they're all mixed up, I'm going to put it on a piece of scratch watercolor paper that I'll be able to work with. So I'm going to just put a little bit out here. Why am I not using dried? Because sometimes a beginner is not going to really understand what I mean when I say get your colors wet so we can use them again, or you're not going to get enough pigment in it. I want to make sure we're all starting with the same amount of pigment. Okay, so now I'm going to get my bubble wet. Anywhere I've got water, I'm inviting it to move to, any color that I put on here. Okay, now I'm going to come down, I'm going to pick up some yellow. Notice I did not go into that whole pile of yellow. I went to the edge of it and pulled it out. And I've got enough pigment on here, just like that. I don't need all of that color. I'm just dropping it right there, and look at it spread. This color loves paper. Okay, now I'm going to wash that out of my brush, and that will become my dirty water. Going to the clean water, I'm going to go to the green now. And once again, I'm just wetting the edge, pushing water up into it. I don't want to get all of that color onto my brush. I've got a large amount of that color that I've got out there. Okay, now I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to just touch it, basically. And this is going to show us what our color is going to do. I'm going to rinse out my brush, go to the clean water. This blue doesn't like to move as much as the other colors did. There it goes. Now I'm going to come up here and just drop it in. Doesn't even want to drop as much as those other colors did. So we're going to encourage it to drop. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush out. I'm going to lay it on the side. And pick up my paper now. And I'm going to let it mix. Remember how overmixing made mud and you no longer saw that color shine through underneath? Even if I overmix this, I'm not getting that color to shine through. I'm not getting that mud color that we got. There's a couple reasons. Number one, we have no opposite color on the color wheel to work here. I'm having a hard time making mud here. What happens if I take some yellow? I didn't even dip into the pigment, and just sprinkle. Does it make mud? Will it overmix? How about get some of that green? Let's do it here. So remember, this is the one we're trying to make mud. And even trying to make mud, we're not making mud. It's beautiful. So now when we do this next bubble, we don't have to worry about making mud because we know that our colors we've chosen are not going to make mud. So I am not going to get the bubble wet. I'm going to work dry. So I'm going to pick up I've got water on my brush, going into the yellow, pick it up. Once again, just drop it on the outside here and let it work. Now, it didn't go anywhere. I'm going to rinse my brush, get some clean water, take some of the water off of that brush. It didn't go anywhere because it's only staying where there is no water. So I've got a damp brush and I'm going to touch the edges of it. Just touch the edge of that. Get some clean water, touch the edge of it again. Wherever I've touched the edge of it, I'm encouraging it to move. And that water or that yellow will start dropping in there. Okay, I've got clean water on my brush. I'm going to go into the green. Come down here. And I'm going to just show you the difference of what's happening here. Where it was wet, the water, I encouraged it to move. Okay, as much as I hate getting rid of all that pigment, I'm going to rinse my brush, get some clean water. Now I'm going to go just on the edge of that and tell it to move. I need some clean water. I need to go to the edge of that and tell it to move. Now I'm going to leave it and I'll come back to it. Get some clean water on the brush. Now let's go into this blue. Rinsing the brush out, get some clean water, go to the edge of that blue, just touch it here and there. You don't even have to touch it all the way around, and tell it to move. Now I'm going to just fill it in with water. I'm going to lift it up and tell those colors to get going. See how we've got a line here developing? That's because it got too dry. So I'm just going to wet it down a little bit. Now it's going to push that color around. I like the color that's happening right here. So I'm going to get some yellow that's wetter. Again, I'm going to put it up here, just in this one spot. I'm going to encourage it to go down into that blue. See how down here, once again, we got a dry mark. No matter what I do, that dry mark is going to stay there. It's a blossom. If I were to go in and try to get it wet now, it would ruin the effect. And I don't really want to do that. There it goes. Okay, I really want to get some of that yellow over here just to see what happens. So I'm just getting a little on my brush, going to tap it in like that. What I'm doing here is I'm learning about my paints. I've learned that if I put neighboring colors together, and these are colors that I really don't know what's going to happen when I put blue to yellow, or this blue to this yellow. And I don't know what's going to happen when I put this cascade to this blue. It's all a learning experience. This was done on wet paper. This was done on dry paper. Do you see the difference between the two? I've learned my colors. Now we could do a wash with a purpose, right? All the other washes we have done haven't been with a purpose to make anything. So let's start with a purpose. Let's put these aside, and we might come back to it. I like the way the wet on wet was able to blend. So I would probably do a wet on wet here. But think about what we are going to do. Blue, greens, and yellows are all watercolors, basically. We could think of a pond with a lily in the middle. And so let's start with the pond. We're going to make a wash, and we're going to put this blue in here. Okay. Now I know that my water is going to go this way. All right. This is a wash, remember. So the edges we aren't looking to create anything that looks like anything else. But we do want to make it seem like water. So I'm just running some water over my washes, just making sure the edges are wet still. Now I wanted to come in and let's get some deeper colors in here. Notice I'm working flat. We are going to come to what happens when I work flat. Flat meaning the paper is laying flat on the paper, on the table. I'm using 140-pound Daniel Smith, or not Daniel Smith, Arches watercolor paper. I just want some watermarks here. This is getting kind of dry here. I would like it to mix in a little bit more. So I'm going to just get it wet on the edges. Come over here, grab some yellow, and let's let it all work together. Remember, we're just doing a wash. We don't want it to look like anything yet. Let's add some more blues. All right. So this is done flat. I'm telling it where to go, what to do, and it's pretty much staying where I tell it to stay. I'm going to want my lily right here. So I'm kind of wiping that out. Now I want the sky to come in, but I want it to be not as bold as the water below. So what I'm doing is I'm wetting the sky area, and I'm going to use that blue. Just drop it here and there. It might have a couple clouds. I've kept all of my strokes going this way. But for the sky, I want to lift up my paper to a 45-degree angle and let it run down. And then maybe I want it to run this way. Now, the reason the bottom isn't running right now is because it's getting dry already. If I were to try and put anything in there, it would bubble, it would blossom back. And I don't want that to happen, so I'm leaving this to dry. Remember, this was going to be my lily. But maybe there's a reflection right here. So I'm going to encourage it to blossom. And now I'm going to let it dry naturally. The next thing I'm going to do is put it aside, and I'm going to lay it flat. I don't want it to lay on an angle. This is getting pretty dry here. I'm going to draw a little bit of a circle here. And I'm going to show you the difference of letting it dry naturally as opposed to using a hairdryer. So many of the shows or little tutorials you'll see, the people are using hair dryers to dry it fast, thinking, oh, well, I want to get done. Watercolor is something that the less you manipulate it, the better it looks. At least that's my opinion. So we're going to grab a regular old hair dryer. Okay, I know it's kind of hard to see, but this is still a little bit wet. This one here is pretty dry. But I'm going to create another one here because I've got enough of this one working. It doesn't matter how I get the color on here. I'm almost out of blue. So I'm just going to put it on here like this. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. That isn't the lesson. Okay, I've got colors touching each other, which is what I want. Now I'm going to take my hair dryer and I'm going to put it on hot and just below. Okay, now this is dry, and this one is still a little damp, but it's better. But I can show you what happens, the difference. If you look right here, when I started that hair dryer, this was starting to move. Starting to move that way. It stopped it from moving immediately. The color did not interact. If you look at these two that dried naturally, and you look over here at the granulation happening with this blue and yellow mix, that won't happen down here. But yet, if I were doing something, I would want those effects in my picture. I work for these effects right here. Look at the way this has pushed itself there, and you can see the water pushing itself the other way. And the colors that I got up here, that's what I strive for. If you look at this one over here where I work pretty dry on dry, but I wanted it to back run, I got it wetter out here, and so the water pushed it into here and it created this blossom. I know now that's how I can create a blossom. But look at this yellow working down here. If I had dried it with the hair dryer, I wouldn't have gotten this. So you got to be careful when you use the hair dryer. To me, this is exciting. It's got a lot happening, and it's the watercolor doing what watercolor should do. Once we have put a hair dryer on it, we have stopped any interaction between the watercolors. But we can work on it faster. So now let's go back to our wash. This wash is still wet. I can't work on it. I can move to a different area of the paper that might be drier, but I would just wait an extra, probably half an hour for this to finish working. I'll be able to do stuff with this. But this is a wash that I created for a purpose. The purpose was, it's a sunny day, and there's a few clouds in the sky, and my water lily is sitting right here, and I'm going to come and I'm going to be able to make this the water around the water lily, and maybe I'll put a few lily pads on here. But the wash was created for this reason. It wasn't one of those abstract washes that we did last week. So I will go ahead and I will film this one being finished into a water lily. I decided to put my 3 colors down here, the neighboring colors, and I'm going to talk about that color wheel. I'm going to mix this one here, this yellow here, with this green. Just kind of let them mix together, not doing it. Because we know that yellow and blue make green. Okay, well, let's see if it does. So here's the blue. I put some on here, spreading it out a little bit. I'm going to get some of this yellow. I'm going to drop it in here. And once again, I want this color to mix on its own. Okay, I'm getting a good mix. And I'm going to rinse my brush, get the water out of it, and I want to pull this green out right here. And I want to pull this green out right here. Okay? We know that deep yellow, cadmium deep, and manganese blue is going to make this color green. If we were working on a color wheel where the colors all work together, that color worked together with the oranges and everything else, then we would have to find the secondary color that matches this one right here. So that when we go and we use these colors together, if we don't want to have to mix our green and our yellow, or our blue and our yellow to get green, we're going to have to find this that'll come in a tube. We know that manganese and deep yellow deep does not make the cascade green. So this green isn't right for this blue to work with this yellow. That's not to say you cannot use it. What it means is I can't pick up a tube of it so that if I want that combination, it's going to work in the painting. I have to know that it's just not quite right. It's just a shade off. But it doesn't mean we can't use it in a painting, because we have used it in a painting right here. And the painting that comes out of this is going to be wonderful. We just have to know that we don't have a color green that's going to blend perfectly. That's if you want a perfect blend. And that was just a little bit more color wheel theory.